Stahlschmidt, right?
Stahlschmidt.
Okay. Caroline Stahlschmidt, welcome to Women's Wellness Radio.
Hello, Bridget. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you. You were on a recent thyroid summit, and when a summit comes by, I honestly don't catch much of it. But for some reason, I was attracted to listening to your talk. It might have been the only one I listened to, actually.
Wow.
And I just thought you had great energy. You were just like not too dogmatic or rigid, and talked about the thyroid, which our audience is always hungry for more thyroid information. So I thought let's have you on, and luckily you accepted to just talk about your perspective on Hashimoto's and thyroid disease in general.
Yes, a favorite topic of mine, personally and for my work with
and
clients.
Professionally.
So, exactly.
Well, let's talk about the personal part a little bit. How did you come to be diagnosed?
So in 2009, in July of 2009, my husband, whose name is Paul, who was young at the time, he was 38, was diagnosed with colon cancer. And he's doing great. I often forget to say that. He's cancer-free since 2009 after having many treatments, Western and non-conventional. And of course, that was a incredibly stressful time for both of us and for our family. And later in that year, in December of that year, we happened to have a really excellent primary care physician. And just as my annual exam, he ran a standard lab panel, which included TSH, and mine was pretty wildly elevated. I think it was 7 or 8 or maybe even 9. And I wasn't showing symptoms, although in hindsight I was. I just didn't even know to look. And I was so under stress that I probably would have attributed it to that. So it was actually a little bit of luck that I had a good doctor who ran at least a TSH and saw that it was elevated, and then took the next steps from there.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, this leads us perfectly to the next question is, well, we know your husband was going through cancer, big stress on everybody, but for you, looking back now, you're like a thyroid expert. What factors do you think played into your Hashimoto's?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, definitely that acute stress that I experienced that year in Paul being diagnosed and then managing all of his treatments. And prior to that, well, actually at that time, for about 13 years prior to that, I had worked in a totally different industry in computer software and traveled often for work. And again, when I was in it, I thought I could handle it. It's all I'd ever known in my career. But now in hindsight, it was so hard on me. I mean, it was so hard on me. So, to be in airports and sleeping in hotels and all of those things is just tremendously stressful, at least to my body. So I think that played a role. And I definitely did not get dealt a great card in terms of genes. There's autoimmunity literally all over my mom's side of the family. My mom and her sister both have rheumatoid arthritis, and my grandfather on that side had psoriasis. My grandmother had hypothyroid, probably Hashimoto's, but had never been diagnosed. So lots of autoimmunity present in my family. And then I had just some funky digestive issues going on, which we can talk more about here shortly, that I didn't even know were issues until I learned more. So definitely, again, as a practitioner looking back, leaky gut dysbiosis, something not right there. So yeah, and food sensitivities that were uncovered once I knew what to look for.
Yeah, so many people have unhealthy guts and just don't even know,
Yeah, I always say now it's like, it's not a conversation that you're having at the dinner table typically of like, hey, what's your poop like? What's your poop like? Unless maybe you have a baby or a sick animal. And I think most people don't actually know what's normal or what is normal because they only know what's normal for them. And it wasn't until I started studying more deeply as a practitioner that the light bulb started going on of like, hey, this maybe is not normal in terms of digestion. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe, we have a pretty educated audience, but maybe just say what in your opinion is normal and not normal.
Sure. I think that the issue that most people have, and I will say I'm a very unusual Hashimoto's case because all my symptoms are almost paradoxical to sort of, if you read through a list of Hashimoto's symptoms, I almost fall to the other side in almost all of them, except for maybe cold hands and feet. But a more typical presentation would be constipation. Mine was loose bowels that had been for as long as I could remember. So again, I didn't realize it wasn't normal. It wasn't extreme diarrhea by any means, but definitely rapid movement, as I used to say. So normal, which I can say I am now, which is thrilling, is 1 to 3 bowel movements a day of good size and easy to pass, but not too loose. That would be what's considered normal. And the other thing, though, that I have now realized, Bridget, is there's fluctuation through the month, especially I think if you're a woman. Now that I'm more normalized, I can see where it shifts like through the month with changes in my different points in my cycle and hormones. Certainly the things that you eat are potentially going to affect it, but you're looking for sort of the middle path. And I say that too because many of the clients that we work with at our clinic, we've trained them to be really tuned into their poop, but sometimes they get too tuned in, any little tiny fluctuation and they're freaking out. It's like, whoa, we're looking sort of for the pattern, not one day where things were a little off. Like we all have that. But if it's a daily occurrence or a month or a year or years, then we start to wonder what's going on in there.
That's good advice for sanity. That like 5 out of 7 days or something.
Yeah.
Normal. Same with the period too. People will tell me,
right.
I had this really weird period this month. I'm like, I'm not really going to worry about it if it happened 1 month. If it keeps happening for 3 months, then you can call me back.
Right, exactly. There's some
it.
fine balance there of being aware and tracking, and we can talk about that more, and not being hyper vigilant or, reacting to every single symptom.
Because we do have stresses that will, keep coming up in our lives. And even if you're avoiding, some foods you've become sensitive to, and if you eat it out at a restaurant or eat too late at night, things like that could throw you off, I imagine.
Absolutely. Stress, lack of sleep, right? All of these things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I skipped one little point that maybe we should make, which is you found you had this high TSH, but that's not a marker of autoimmunity per se. So you want to explain a bit more about all that?
Yeah, sure. So my primary care doctor saw the high TSH, and then, he was not all doctors, but he then ran a full thyroid panel. So then we could see what was going on with the actual thyroid hormones, the T3 and T4. And at the time, I wasn't educated enough to understand all of this, but luckily he was. And then he ran the panels for the 2 antibodies, which do indicate Hashimoto's. And I was, both antibodies were present, TPO and TPA. So then we knew it was Hashimoto's, and then especially with my history. But at the time, he started me on Synthroid. And it's funny because a year or 2 later, he's like, why did I start you on Synthroid? Because he normally would use Armour, which is a more natural thyroid hormone replacement, as I'm sure you know, and many of your listeners know. But at the time, Armour was having some issues, and it was coming on and off the market. So he had started me on Synthroid. And I say we revisited it because I went back to him once I learned more and said, I'd really like to try a more natural version. But at the time I started on Synthroid, not knowing, neither here nor there, what the options were. And honestly, I was so focused on my husband's health that I kind of just did what he said. I didn't research it really. I just kind of like, okay, I trust my doctor. I'm just going to do what he says. Because I did fully trust him, and I knew he wouldn't put me on something that he didn't really believe that I needed. So, yeah.
I'm just curious, like how high were your antibodies with that high TSH?
I don't remember what they were at the start, but I still tend to have high antibodies. So it's an interesting discussion because oftentimes this is another place where I see clients getting really attached to that number, that antibody number. And I too was attached to that antibody number. And now I'm not sure. It's like, I feel I feel really good. My other thyroid hormones are in line. As you probably know, a traditional endocrinologist wouldn't even run the thyroid antibody panels again. Once they see those antibodies, that's pretty much it. They never run it again. I fortunately have an endocrinologist who will run it. He'll run it once a year. So I get to see them. And TPO has dropped to almost normal, but the other, which is the less common antibody actually associated with Hashimoto's, TPA, has remained elevated, like above 1,000 for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, still super high. So, but I feel great, and all of my symptoms have resolved for the most part. So I just kind of roll with it for now, and sort of know there might be something else lurking there, but I'm not sure what it is. So there's not much more I can do. Oh, there's nothing more I can do in terms of dietary cleanup and how I take care of myself. So I figure I always have concern that there's other autoimmunity lurking there, especially because of the history of rheumatoid arthritis in my family. But so far, so good. So,
and you've had those checked too for like other common autoimmunes?
Yeah, I've never had RH factor checked.
Is that rheumatoid?
Yes, okay. Yes. But I don't have joint pain that is of like long term. I might get joint pain here and there. So,
yeah, it's an interesting advanced point we're kind of bringing up, because some people will say, I know Isabella Wentz says in her books, your antibodies will come down when you're in remission, but then there's also like, well, the immune system has been stimulated, and
right.
Maybe it's normal, especially if you're feeling good. Like you said, it's not really, what do they say in our training program? Like, you don't treat the test results. I think that's
right. Yeah, you don't treat the labs.
You treat the person. Yeah.
Yeah, and it would have been easy to get those results like last year. What's interesting is my thyroid markers are all getting better. Like, I've continually dropped my thyroid medication dosage, but then I see the antibodies. It's like, well, something's happening there. So, but I think it can go both ways. I could have seen the labs and seen that my actual thyroid hormones are getting better and been like, woohoo, I'm awesome. Like, I know what I'm doing as a practitioner, as a patient. But then on the flip side, see the antibodies and get really depressed or upset. And instead it's like, it's just a point in the journey. That's what Andrea, who I work with, her husband passed away of a brain tumor. And she and I have often talked about how, it's so challenging, at least as I'm sure as the person, but also as the partner. Like, anytime my husband has a colonoscopy, it like sends me into PTSD just thinking about getting those results. And she said that she used to be the same, and her husband would always just say, it's just a sign in the road that's going to direct our next step. So I've tried to take that super calm approach about labs. It's like, okay, it's good to see what's going on in there, and I want to see them, but I'm not going to like completely throw away everything that I'm doing just because of the labs. So,
okay. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to ask you another question, which might bring up a debate.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm pretty into Epstein Barr because I have it, and it's a pretty strong factor in my own case. So I just wondered, have you checked it in your case? How often do you see it being a factor with your clients?
That's actually a good question. And, I have never checked it. I'm pausing because I actually had a really strange infection this year. I had E. coli poisoning that manifested really strangely in me, like with some neurological symptoms and muscle weakness. And I'm pausing because I know they checked me for mono, but again, I was pretty sick, so I wasn't in like full control like I might be as far as what labs they were running. So I'm not sure how detailed of a panel they did at that time. I know I didn't have mono. But it's an interesting question you bring up, because I tend to always have a low total white blood count. So it's probably something that I should have checked. You're pointing me in a direction.
Yeah, I'm definitely only trying to be helpful. But yeah,
no, it's super. I love it. Yeah. And the other thing though that's quirky, even though I just revealed that I had like this crazy E. coli infection, I actually, I'm gonna knock on my desk, actually rarely get sick. So that's why I don't tend to think Epstein Barr. And I have really good energy, but yeah, I think it's a good one to investigate. That, and of
Yeah.
course, Lyme would be the other one that we often see sort of lurking in the shadows that
For
is,
sure. Yeah.
causing a much bigger issue, but kind of hidden, right? As far as the symptoms it causes and how it manifests.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'll just share for the audience, and maybe you'll find it interesting too, that sometimes when you have Epstein-Barr, you'll get like a false Lyme positive. And that like often doctors will dismiss what looks like old Epstein-Barr, which frankly, almost all of us have old Epstein-Barr because we get it like as kids, we get it as small children, asymptomatic. But just because it's old doesn't mean in you it's not active in its own way, in its own stage. So like for you, you might not ever get sick, or I get sick a lot. But yeah, it's just interesting. I don't think it's every case. But there's a guy who has a new book on thyroid, Anthony Williams, who hopefully will get on the show. And he's just gone really deep into this thyroid Epstein-Barr connection, which for my case, again, when I read his work, I'm like, that's me. So I don't know if everyone resonates with his work, but for me, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's worth investigating, but
For sure.
It's also really good that you feel good. So maybe we won't harp on it too much.
Yeah,
so
and it's interesting because I've certainly done a lot of immune support along the way. So
maybe that's helped you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a thing to consider.
So when you first found out you had this, got diagnosed, you didn't really know you had it, so to speak, but you did have this loose stool and stuff. So I wondered what's been your evolution of symptoms from then to now?
Yeah. So as I said, I'm sort of paradoxical in my symptoms. First on the poop side, most people are constipated. That was not my issue. But I definitely had fatigue, like in hindsight, and now that it's managed, now I can see where if I push too hard or don't eat the most supportive foods for me, just a deep fatigue that would often be, what people think of as sort of a typical afternoon slump. So I just sort of accepted it. Plus I was in sort of this, crazy job where I was traveling all the time. So I just figured I'm just tired, right? That's just the way it is. Probably my weirdest issue is I had red eyes, and not like bloodshot, but just sort of red and scratchy and not itchy like allergies. To paint a picture, it looked like I had either partied a little too hard the night before or smoked a little marijuana, like something wasn't quite right. I wish I had not done either of those things. And that went on for years. And I went to the eye doctor. I tried different contacts, different solutions, nothing. So I don't know if that was a symptom of Hashimoto's or if that was a symptom of systemic inflammation or something going on my gut. It cleared once I did a lot of work, but it wasn't like there was some magic bullet. Like I did this thing and then my eyes cleared. It just was, many things. Yeah. But that was a really frustrating symptom because I was starting to practice as a health coach. I was a yoga instructor. It's like having red eyes is just not cool in those situations. No. And it was uncomfortable. Like it was, made me feel really tired. So that was my strange symptom. And then just skin issues. Like I definitely, if I have something going on, it tends to come out on my skin, rashes, not acne so much, but rashes and things like that. Cold hands and feet, which is very typical Hashimoto's. And at the time I had really low ferritin. I think it was like 20 or maybe lower when I first had it run. So those were, I didn't have any symptoms that were debilitating. Certainly not. I was still living a full life and really active athlete, but things were not right, when I look back, and I wasn't able to live to the fullest extent that I wanted to.
Yeah, and a lot of things you're describing, like a lot of people have, really, frankly, out there in the world. Yeah. And they just, like have a cup of coffee or use eye drops and like just let it go. And, it's good that you caught it because I think we now know like you'll probably develop a new autoimmune disease every 10 years if you don't like keep an eye on it, if you don't reverse things. So, hopefully that's helped you. Because, most of us don't think about like colon cancer or any of these like diseases that usually come as we get older. We just don't think about it. But then they come, and as you know, they're really devastating. So like the more we can do to like catch, I mean, yeah, having red eyes is a sign. There's something visible you can see that's off. And if like you're not getting any answers, it's worth to keep digging.
Yeah. And I did. I like could have bought stock in Visine. It was like how I got through the days. Yeah. And now you asked how it's changed. Well, my eyes are clear. Yay. And I still, it's been a few years now, but still every once in a while I'm like, gosh, I really like my eyes were red all the time. So eyes are clear. Digestion is mostly normal. It's still my weak spot. Like that's what I often tell clients. We all have a weak spot. Some people get migraines. Some people have allergies. Some people have crazy digestion or can't sleep. Like I firmly believe we all have a weak spot or that weak link in the fence. And that's when things go a little off the rails. That's probably the part of you that is going to shift or not be functioning optimally. So I have to tend to my digestion, but overall it is in that normal range that we talked about at the start of the call, as well as skin issues. For the most part, good, but still my weak spot. Like I might start to get a little rash or something. So then I just know it's time to tune in and maybe do a little liver support or a little extra digestion support. I gotta say, I live in a cold place, so I probably still have cold feet, but I'm okay with that. I have my Uggs on right now to try and combat that. And fatigue is so much better. But one thing that I really had to do, Bridget, is get super strict about my bedtime, which sometimes drives my husband crazy, but it's like, no, like things don't go well if I'm not like asleep by 10:30. So 10 to 10:30, that's when I'm really aiming for bedtime, and I need 8 hours and I need it to be quality sleep. So I just make that a huge priority, as much as possible. Obviously I'll bend a little bit if we're traveling or going out with friends, but on a daily basis, sleep is just a huge priority. And I try and recommend that to all clients, whether they want to hear that or not.
We have a ton in common. Like I have to sleep. If I go off, like we had family come to town for Thanksgiving and I still ate pretty well compared to most people, but like, just a little, and that will really throw off my gut. Or traveling. I've heard Andrea say this too, like, and it stinks because I love to travel, but it's almost more just like, you'll usually have late nights with travel,
And being in the air, like if you're, driving's hard too, but there's something now that I don't do it all the time. Something about being in the air, and plus the airports, just all of it is hard.
Germy, the air quality. I'm just not great with it. And I hope I get stronger, but I definitely, like, I'm planning a trip. Like I only fly in the daytime. I do not fly overnight at all.
Right, like a red eye. Oh no. Right.
No way.
Yeah.
It's just like I'm a little high maintenance, but if I do those things, I'll mostly stay in track.
Right. Well, and the other, like my husband and I did a trip earlier this year, and I knew I had this E. coli infection, so I knew I wasn't super strong. And I said, I want to do this trip, but I just need to have some boundaries. Like we can't overschedule because that's what we tend to do. We're away, so we want to hike and bike and do all these things. And for the most part, we did. So I just said, like, I'm going to need to take a little more time to rest than we normally might. And it's probably myself that needs to be reined in, not that he's making me do things. So.
Yeah, you're just verbalizing like this is what I need to. Yeah, I think that's great. Same with me. I go to these conferences and then every night there's some big dinner or party and it's like I can't do a whole day of conferencing and a whole night of partying. Like there's even if I don't drink, it's just staying up late and just being like on all day is too much. So and it's amazing. I think you do find like when you do these things, when you do cut back, like it works. Like it's not like it works as if, the world isn't going to come to an end if you call in an early night,
Oh, no.
Life goes on.
Not at all. They won't even know you're not there. You just play.
No, it's all in our head. Or like I've really had to kind of shorten my work day lately. I realize like it's just too much for me to work 8 hours. And it's fine. Initially
you
I'm like,
actually get more done because you're not sitting at your desk trying to pretend that you're working for 8 hours.
Zombie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the result is when you are on, you're really on, like, you know, like you are right now. It's like, yeah, maybe you had to go to bed early last night, but now you're able to do a great interview and be, you know, where you want to be. So it's sort of like a worthwhile.
Yeah, but
sacrifice.
it's such an important point that you bring up, Bridget, because so many, especially, you know, a lot of what we work with clients is dietary change that they don't necessarily want to make. And it's like, but I'm missing out on being social with friends or going to this party. It's like, you can still do all of that. I mean, I have a friend who has a cookie exchange party every year for the holidays, and you're supposed to bring 5 dozen cookies and you then take, you know, 5 dozen home. And last year I told her, I said, I really want to come, but like, I have no interest in bringing home 5 dozen gluten
sugary cookies.
And I also, I mean, I didn't tell her this. I also have no interest in baking 5 dozen cookies that are going to cost me a lot of money because I use really good ingredients and sharing them. So she's like, just come, don't bring cookies. So that's what I've done the past 2 years. Nobody even knows that I didn't bring cookies, and I still get the social part, right? So it's like, you can completely participate in life.
Yeah.
You need to have some parameters that you work within.
Yeah. And I always encourage people too, you know, just test out my advice or your, you know, whatever advice you're getting. And then you can go back or experiment, because you're going to find your own boundaries. Like maybe you can have 1 cookie,
right?
Maybe not if you're Hashimoto's, but like, you know, maybe you can have 1 drink sometimes or whatever. But like, you're going to learn when you have 5 cookies or 5 drinks, probably that you feel pretty bad, especially if you have Hashimoto. So you can learn your, you know, and then it's you making this decision. Nobody else is making it for you. And then, like you talked about, you can create these positive solutions. So,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
Great. So let's talk a little bit more about food. You're a nutritionist. A lot of people on this show mind their diet, which is great. But a lot of people have little questions too, like, you know, things they're still trying to tweak. So I wonder if you can share some of your like advanced moves that you learned over the years.
Yeah, so I've had a interesting journey there. Before my husband was diagnosed with cancer, I would say we ate a fairly healthy standard American. Like, you know, we were okay standard American. And then when he was diagnosed, this doctor that who diagnosed my Hashimoto's that we were both working with was a pretty strong advocate for veganism, especially in light of cancer. And we pretty much overnight transitioned to a vegan diet. So that is what we did for about 3 years. Pretty strict, pretty dogmatic, like this is the way everyone should be. And we both felt pretty good. I mean, I would say my energy felt good, overall felt good. At the time, I didn't realize that I hadn't like learned enough to know that I had digestive issues. I had them. I just didn't realize they weren't normal, as we talked about. So that wasn't great, but it wasn't any different than it had been before. So we stayed there for about 3 years. And then once, and I will say I was really dogmatic about it. Like, this is, you know, you can eat however you want, but everyone should eat vegan. I mean, that was pretty much was my approach, which is not my approach now, which is probably obvious in the way that I'm talking. And then when I started studying with Andrea Nakayama, who I work with now, when I took the digestive intensive and just started to understand more what was happening, looking at my symptoms, looking at my husband's symptoms, who, although he was cancer-free, he'd had radiation, he'd had surgery to surgically remove part of his colon. He had major digestive issues that we couldn't figure out. Rapid transit, loose bowels, gas. So we slowly started to transition. We had no goal in mind. We just felt like I started to think we need to see what happens if we take out beans and grains, if we take out grains and beans and legumes. And if you're eating a vegan diet and you do that, there's not much left to eat. So we started to slowly add back in animal protein, which he was thrilled to do. I was a little less thrilled, but willing to do it. So then we kind of landed in this sort of paleo-ish, but not without a name. You know, we weren't naming it that. It wasn't like some people like, I'm going to do paleo for 30 days. We were just kind of experimenting. And then I actually, I have a good friend who lives in my town who you might know. Her name's Eileen Laird. She does the Phoenix blog and podcast, and she's big in the AIP community. And she was by no means trying to convince me to try autoimmune paleo protocol. But the more I thought about it, I felt like maybe that's the direction I need to go. So I went pretty strict AIP for quite some time, probably longer than I should have, but I started to see big results. I think one of the big triggers for me actually was nuts and seeds. I can eat, like I'm to the point now where I can eat a little bit of them, but a lot probably is not the best for me. So, and now I eat the Caroline diet. I mean, I eat what works for me. It's a modified AIP, but there's lots of modification in there. Like I use chickpea flour, I eat eggs, I eat nightshades, but I don't eat a lot of those things. So I've landed somewhere in a modification. And honestly, there is no one dietary protocol for everyone. That would be awesome if that was the answer. Like, this is the magic protocol, but there's not. You know that, and I know that, and your listeners probably know that. And the way that I figured it out was just tracking. In our clinic, we use a tool called the Food Mood Poop Tracker, just a food journal, but we also are tracking symptoms and poop. And, this is where I encourage clients and I encourage myself to tune in. How do I feel when I eat this food? What happens? How are my symptoms? So through tracking and through just experimentation, I just landed in this Caroline diet, which I guess you would call modified AIP. And the other thing that I always want to remind or say or state is, for us, paleo or AIP doesn't mean the all meat diet. Not at all. We came from this place of veganism. So tons of vegetables. I always think of it as plant powered. Like yes, I eat animal protein, but it's a small part of a plate that is filled with vegetables. So that's what I like to focus on.
I like that. I like that you're plant powered. I'll share what I've been doing lately, because I've been reading this Anthony Williams that I'm into right now, and he's pretty plant-based too. Like he recommends doing like raw fruit and juice, or not fruit and vegetables, for a month, which I'm not doing, but I'm doing a I'm only having meat once a day, which is feeling pretty, and I'm having a lot of vegetables, and I'm doing a good amount of juicing. I don't like to eat raw all the time. When you talked about your digestion or your husband's being off as a Chinese medicine person, that's a lot of cold.
Oh man, my man cannot do raw. Like that was the one thing we figured out which as vegan, we were like piling on not that you have to eat all raw when you're vegan, but we were. So in hindsight, it's like, that probably wasn't the brightest move, but especially
not like it's winter now. It's not. So, but I feel really good doing more juices, doing more vegetables. And I seem to feel well doing less meat. I was doing kind of like modified paleo for a long time now, but then when I read his work, I was like, well, I'm still tired in the afternoon. I still have toxins in my body. Why not try something new? So I think it's good to, like you had an open mind and you just tried stuff, and it seemed like it worked. I did not, when we were vegan, I was really dogmatic. And then when that started to become clear, like, this isn't working, like that was hard to let that go. So that's why I'm so not dogmatic now, because I truly think everyone's unique. And the other thing I really think, and I know you do a lot with hormones, Bridget, especially as women, we change through our lifespan. So what might work now, or what might have worked for me 5 years ago, I'm at a different place with my body and my hormones. I'm shifting. So what I need as far as food and how I thrive might shift as well. So now I just try and stay open and receptive to that and really tune in. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm very curious about alkalizing now. And we had someone on the show recently who was saying it's important to be like alkaline through menopause. And I was like, I don't really know why he's saying that. So I want to learn more, because it's like, what does that mean exactly? So yeah, it's just fun. Like, let's have fun with it. That's why I like your
and not be scared. That's the other thing. And I was definitely in this place where I got sort of afraid of food. When you do some of those healing protocols, it not intentionally, but you can start to become afraid of food and associate any symptom or any fluctuation in your health with food. That is definitely the direction that I headed, and certainly that I see a lot of clients. And now I'm just a lot softer about it. It's like, I had some eggs and I feel a little tired, but not so much that I'm ready to write them off. Like, I'm going to give it a couple of days, but you have to do a lot. You have to do the healing work to get to that place where you are resilient enough to start to bring foods in and start to play a little bit. But it definitely, when I was deep in that, in working with AIP, I associated every symptom with food that I ate. And now I'm much softer about it. It's like, it could be that I went for a big hike yesterday and I'm just tired from that. So I think that's the other sort of cautionary tale, because I definitely see, we see a lot of clients come to our clinic who are just afraid of food. And, you know, sometimes there's reason to be on a healing protocol and have limited diet, but I don't want to see people afraid of food or afraid to introduce foods or try them. So
you're giving me all these great segues. I love it. Yeah, because food is not everything. Food is only part of life, and we get very focused on food or very focused on supplements. And I'm thankful for my own healing journey that I really realized, like, sunshine and movement and this kind of thing also really energizes me, and it's just as important. And it's part of a healthy life more than obsessing about food is part of a healthy life. Right.
Now, you can't eat gluten all day and hope for the best.
No.
But I think we're on the same page.
There's other things.
Because obsessing about food is causing your body a tremendous amount of stress. Like, if you're so stressed out.
So let's talk about some of the other things we can pull in to make us healthier. And you're a yoga teacher, which I love. We don't talk about yoga much on the show. So
we need to do a podcast on yoga.
I know. We have had, do you know Kate Stillman from Yoga Healer?
Yeah. I feel like
she's on sometimes, but she talks more about Ayurveda and habits.
Cool.
What's your angle that you focus on with yoga?
Well, I've taught asana, physical yoga, for about 9 years. I've probably practiced for, maybe 20 years. But I've taught for about 9. And I came to yoga. I was teaching yoga before Paul was diagnosed with cancer. So it's not like I had this huge yoga awakening after Hashimoto's or cancer. I was teaching before. But I do feel as if it has played just a critical role in getting through that and my own healing journey. The obvious things: stress management, flexibility, but for me, also just balance of life balance, and also strength, right? Turning into, I've always been an athlete, but just sort of harnessing that inner strength. When my husband was diagnosed, I used to, people would always say, I don't know how you're getting through this. I don't know how you're doing it. And now in retrospect, when you are faced with a difficult situation, you find out how strong you are, what your inner strength really is. And I think yoga helps us do that all the time, right? We get to explore that all the time.
That's true.
For me, just mindfulness, just being tuned in all these ways that we've talked about, tuning into your body and your symptoms and just your life and what you really need. So I love practicing yoga and I love teaching yoga, and I've seen some really profound experiences for many of the students who come to my classes too. So it's exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's sort of almost like diet. Like, it's just like, you get these little victories, like, all the time, that can add up to something big, but it's probably hard to summarize. Oh, how does it help Hashimoto's? Exactly.
Yeah. And it's not, I think, we always joke, we're all looking for the magic bullet. Nothing that I did was the thing that was like, oh my God, this changed everything. You'll hear people talk about essential oils or a supplement or whatever it is. For me, I always picture it like I was building I was building a house, and there was like a brick by brick by brick laying of the foundation. And there wasn't one brick that made the house. There was all those bricks together that created the strong foundation and then the house. So,
that's good.
It doesn't mean that you have to do all of those things, but you can't just do one thing. You can't just give up gluten or just start doing yoga. You might have a profound experience, especially depending on where you're coming from. But for me, it's all of that whole picture.
Yeah. I just want to share, because I don't think I've shared this on the show. So when I first found out about my mold, I was really sick and tired, and I think I canceled my yoga membership. And when I emailed them, they're like, oh, you need yoga now more than ever. And I was like, no. Maybe if I was like the laying around on the floor type yoga, but not the yoga that they were doing. No way. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do anything. And then I did a little bit, in the interim, more gentle. But we recently moved to Arizona. I finally found a yoga studio. You never know what you're going to get when you go to a new place.
Right.
So it was hot yoga. It was very advanced. And I was just thrown into it. And I did well. And I sweated hard. And it felt amazing. It felt like just this great, like, coming home to like a hard yoga practice. And it was really wonderful. I definitely want to get back into it. And I think maybe a lot of people have this journey with yoga where, their practice changes over time.
Yeah, and it's a great point that you make. First of all, people sometimes have a perception of what yoga is. There's so many different styles of yoga, so many different teachers. So if you've tried yoga and didn't love it, be open to some other styles and some exploration. I mean, there's gentle yoga, there's super physical yoga. I could, kick your butt with yoga, or you can have a completely relaxing, like the other day I did a class with hot stones where we just held poses for 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
It was totally relaxing. So there's such a range with yoga. And there's yoga that has nothing to do with moving your body physically. There's breath work called pranayama. There's chanting. There's so many ways.
True.
True. So,
yeah, it's I think the hardest thing sometimes is just carving out, and you can do it at home certainly, but just carving out the time. But it's just like meditating. It's great to take that time for yourself to slow down or be strong. Like you said, I love that. That's a great example.
And I think a lot of people too feel like when I go to a yoga studio, class is an hour or so, or hour 15 or hour and a half. So that's yoga. But I always like to remind people, yoga could just be that you do child's pose for 5 minutes at home in the middle of your day. Like, that's yoga too. So you can do a very short sequence and still get many of the all of the benefits, really. So I think we do that with many things, with exercise, thinking, well, if I can't go to the gym for an hour, then I'm just not going to do anything. Well, no, even if you did a minute of jumping jacks in the middle of your day, it's something. It's better than nothing. So just exploring those little bite-sized pieces can be really powerful.
Yeah, that's great. And also can get your energy up. So obviously I could chit chat with you like for hours. So
it sounds like we're kindred spirits.
We're doing well. So I want to share some of your resources and kind of we've been name dropping a little bit who you work with, but how exactly do you work? What do you offer? What are some things you have for our audience?
So I work for and with Andre Nakayama, who is, we are the Functional Nutrition Alliance, formerly known as Replenish. And I think Andre has been on your podcast in the past, Bridget, but we've recently been rebranding. So we are the Functional Nutrition Alliance, and we do have a clinic where we see patients or clients. And one of the things, or I should say our website is fxnutrition.com. So that's fxnutrition.com, and you can learn more about the Alliance and the things that we offer. We have cleanses and detoxes for patients or clients that they can take, and as well as we have training programs for practitioners, which is where I do a lot of my work in our organization. So nutritionists, health coaches who want to learn to work in the way that we do in our clinic can study with Andrea. And one of the tools that I mentioned is the Food Mood Poop Journal. And this we use with literally every client who comes in our door at the clinic. And we teach our practitioners to do it as well. And it's not food journaling like you might think of as like Weight Watchers. Like, we're not actually interested in how much or calories or anything of this sort. We're trying to map symptoms. Like, we're always trying to look for those clues and we like to call it being a detective. So have clients keep a food, mood, poop journal for at least 3 to 5 days. So they're tracking what they ate, any symptoms they experience. The mood piece of it often throws people off, but by mood, we just mean symptoms or energy or anything that's coming up for you. And then of course, poop, which as we talked about is important. Really, it is like one of our best diagnostic tools that many of us don't even know what to do with, how to use as a diagnostic tool. So if people are interested, they can get a copy of, we have a little ebook where you can access the Food Mood Poop challenge where Andrea walks you through how to do that. And that's at fxnutrition.com/FMP challenge. And people can download a copy for themselves.
FX Nutrition. Okay. So I have it as replenishpdx.com FMP challenge. Has that been updated?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it may be redirected on you. That one will work. Yeah.
That one will be. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you guys were called Replenish PDX and Holistic Nutrition Lab, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So Andrea started her counseling practice in Portland, is where she lives. And the counseling practice was originally called Replenish. And then our practitioner training was Holistic Nutrition Lab. And now we've brought it all together under the Functional Nutrition Alliance. And we have the clinic where we see clients. And then we have group programs for patients. And then our practitioner side is getting rebranded to the Functional Nutrition Lab in the new year.
Oh, practitioner. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Yeah, I like it. You know, it's funny. I give to my clients what I call a food and mood journal, and it includes poop, but I didn't call it the poop. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just a fundamental tool of observation and for yourself. But yeah, as a practitioner, it's so interesting to see like day to day, like what people are eating and what they're experiencing.
Well, and we have to, people might come in and say, oh, I eat paleo. Well, what does that mean for you? Are you eating bacon all day? Or are you eating, lots of, so even though we have these dietary parameters, it's still, you don't necessarily have a sense of what someone's eating. And sometimes they don't have a sense of what they're eating until they start to track it. The challenge is, like anything, when you start to track it, you want to modify it. So we always just tell people, like, really, we just want the real truth. Like, how are you eating? You don't need to pretend or do something different to try and please us. Like, we want to know, how are you eating?
Yeah, that's so true. And I've gotten really in where I'm going to create, like, what's in production, like just a wellness journal too, because you can do this really detailed food, mood, poop for a while, but you can also just like reflect on your day and like, how did my symptoms go? And like, where did I overdo it today or do a good job? And that little reflection is just like all these light bulbs go off. And like you said, people don't even realize how they're eating. Like,
right. I mean, a lot of times we don't have to do anything. Like, as soon as they start to capture it, they start to make the connections themselves. Sometimes we're looking at it. Oftentimes we're looking at it, figuring out, but many times just that capturing of it helps them to see. And I think I love the wellness journal, Bridget, because the other thing that happens is people forget that they had symptoms. Like with my red eyes, like my sort of external marker is that, hey, I don't have to buy Visine anymore. But it's easy to forget how bad that symptom was once it's gone. Like, I don't have children, but I imagine it's like how people always say with childbirth, you forget immediately like how difficult it was. So sometimes we call it the continuum tracker, where we'll have them give their symptoms a 1 to 10 so that we can reflect back and say, the last session we had, your red eyes was a 10 and now you're saying it's a 6. So we are making progress here in what we're doing. So all of that sort of tracking is helpful in many ways.
Yeah. You don't notice an absence of something.
Right. Right.
It's like amazing how your brain does that. Yeah. Yes. Then the practitioner doesn't get any credit.
Right. Yeah.
We gotta get our credit. No, I'm just kidding.
Or just an awareness of like, well, I am getting better. Because sometimes, like, you probably work with these complex cases where there's Lyme and Epstein Barr and autoimmunity. There's lots of symptoms. So it can feel like you're not making progress. But so for the client to recognize, I am making progress. Like, last year I was here and now I'm here. So
yeah, and it was very meaningful to me how you said, you still have to be careful of this and that, or this and that symptom can still come up for you. And I think too, when we focus so much on our health, when we're trying to recover from something complex, like we get like also very obsessed about our symptoms and all the little things that go wrong. But if you can realize, like, you know what, I mostly had a great day. I got a lot done. I exercised. It's like, let's count the pro category before we count the con category.
The challenge, right?
And that's important too. So, Caroline, this was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will share all these resources on our show notes. And also, so the show notes, by the way, if you listen to a podcast, you can click on it on the episode and all this text will drop down if you've never done that. And then we also post it all as a blog at bridgetdanner.com. And you can just search Caroline or search Hashimoto's and this will all come up. So thanks again, Caroline.
Thank you so much for having me. A pleasure to be here.